So just do name, organization, and if you'd like to share a fun fact, that's always welcomed as well.
I'll go ahead and unmute if that's okay. I'm Greg. I'm from Young Invincibles. I'm the organizing manager for YI, and in that role, I manage our grassroots organizing, consumer education, and our. I do a whole bunch of stuff that actually I was trying to make it sound cute. I just do everything and a whole lot, and it's fantastic. And I'm really glad to be here at 8:30 in the morning.
We love it. Multiple hats. Thanks for introducing yourself, Greg. All right, everyone. So let's go ahead and begin. So good morning. If you're joining, please introduce yourself in the chat. And welcome to our November Health Equity Collective networking session. My name is Alicia Johnston. I will be the facilitator for today's discussion on water quality and health. I serve on the steering committee of the Health Equity Collective and co-lead the communications work group. If you're not familiar with the Health Equity Collective, or the Collective for short, we are a network of over 180 organizations across Greater Houston with the goal of establishing an impactful, sustainable, data-driven system to promote health equity and address the social drivers of health outcomes. So every month we host a virtual networking session on different topics, all through a health equity lens. These monthly themed networking sessions give our members just an opportunity to discuss resources and actions their organizations are taking based on that monthly theme. And it's just an opportunity to encourage everyone to get to know each other and the work that's being done across our region and the work that's happening outside the formal collective meetings. Today's session is on water quality and health, and our speakers include Ayanna McLeod and Dr. Span Tumuri. I will read both speakers' bios and then invite Dr. Tumuri to present her slides, which I think she's already sharing her screen here. And then we'll pause for questions, and then we'll invite Ayanna to the stage to present. All the slides, the resources, and notes will be shared after today's session. We'll post those onto our Mighty Networks platform. I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat so everyone. Span, we're actually going to have Ayanna present first, if you don't mind. I forgot about that. Sorry about that, Ayanna. So if you don't mind, we're going to start with Ayanna, and then we'll invite you to the stage. But the link to the Mighty Networks is there in the chat. So let me start with Ayanna's bio here. So Ayanna is the executive director at Bayou City Waterkeeper, where she supports community efforts in wetland protection, water quality, and watershed resiliency, which center on equity and nature-based solutions. Prior to this, Ayanna was director of education and public programs at Houston Botanic Gardens, launching the organization's first ever education offerings, framing biodiversity and ethnobotany. She has worked at environmental and cultural institutions for over 20 years. She's a native Houstonian and fourth-generation artist. She develops frameworks for new ways of imagining and advocating for water, ecology, justice, and people in Greater Houston. Our second speaker, Span, is an experienced strategy development lead, technical lead, and water resource planner, providing strategic consulting services to clients for comprehensive management of water resources. She is proficient in developing One Water and integrated water solutions for various regional and water utilities. She is experienced at building collaborations among diverse stakeholders on key water management issues. Her background is in delivering resilient and sustainable projects for water utilities for the past 16 years. She has developed uncertainty evaluations, climate adaptation studies, and climate action plans for various utilities. And her passion is developing sustainable and alternative solutions of water supplies. She has been a longstanding member of AWWA and currently acts as a trustee of the WRSD committee. She works for Jacobs as an operations manager for the Coastal Texas Geography in Texas. We welcome both of our speakers. Thank you for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, Ayanna.
Great, thanks, Alicia. Good morning, everyone. Can you all see my screen and only my screen, not my desktop?
We can see your desktop as well.
Ah, okay.
Which is much cleaner than mine. So I'm glad you're sharing.
Hold on a second, just a second. All right, what about now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Hold on a second. So good morning. I'm happy to be here. And I've known about the group before. I've joined you all before, and I want to talk to you all about Bayou City Waterkeeper and our work. So I'm going to kind of talk to you about a few things. We work in a really unique way. And so our work is big, bold, kind of messy, and all like intentionally so. And so we work across disciplines. We work in a highly collaborative way, and we kind of see this as the best way to do this in order to fight for our waters in our community. In terms of health equity, this is an emerging sort of a lens. And so I welcome, you'll see at the kind of end of this presentation, a missing piece of our work that I look forward to developing further is the health equity lens in a much more pronounced, overt way. We are a small organization, we're a 4-person team, and we are doing big, bold work for this large region. And so we have identified a few gaps, and one of those is the health equity lens, but you'll see that that's a natural next step in our work. Okay, so I just want to talk to you about kind of who we are, what we do. And it looks like I forgot to add additional tools, but that's okay. So Bayou City Waterkeeper, we use law and science to advocate for water quality, wetlands protection, flood mitigation, and also water infrastructure. And then an emerging lens and kind of like a lens that we are bringing in the forefront that has kind of been a part of our work previously, a little bit more subtly, is like the climate resilience and environmental justice piece. That's something that we realize needs to be at the forefront of our work. And we've done that in a more overt way in the past 2 years. Some key sort of themes that I wanted to lift up about our work that I think might be helpful in kind of accessing the work is that we see water as the point of entry to address larger systemic inequities around housing, infrastructure, and health. And so we think about water as this catalyst for community transformation in Houston, because we are the Bayou City, we are a water-rich city, but if we can fix water, then we can fix so many other things. Our role is very much as a strategic liaison. And so we work between community partners on the ground, and then also local and regional decision makers and policy makers to fight for community members and to kind of use the law to fight for equitable policy and policy that also centers nature-based solutions. We build local power from this sort of bottom-up approach. And so really increasingly trying to anchor ourselves in the community for this larger sort of bookend approach. So we are rooting ourselves in community to determine community-related water issues to shift policy in a higher sort of larger sort of perspective. And then we see community members as experts in their own health, in their homes, neighborhoods, and their waterways. And we use, I'll talk a little bit more about this, data to action research, maps, litigation and enforcement, and increasingly education. These are some images of our work. And this kind of gives you kind of a little bit more concrete example of like how we work. So this image right here at the top left is when we went on site after doing lots of research of a potential development, unlawful development in a wetland. We went on site to take some photos and to actually get the soil sample. This second image is a soil sample to see the indicators of the wetland before we started to pursue in support for towards legal work to issue intent to sue the developer to fight and protect the wetland. We also do clean water work, and this is a sample of nurdles And so this is a very emerging exploratory aspect of our work around microplastics. And so we had our very first microplastics fellow working with our community science manager to get some nurdle samples out of our waters. And so that's a huge issue in the region, and we're just trying to figure out capacity around that. We fight for nature-based solutions, and this is actually in collaboration with a community partner and to do aquaponics education. And so we're just thinking about the role that water plays around solutions for different communities. I think for 2023, we're really thinking about the importance of nature-based solutions as it intersects with Black and Brown communities, BIPOC communities, because we don't always see that intersection happening. We have our conservation partners fighting for nature-based solutions. We have our environmental justice partners fighting for equity. And so how can nature-based solutions help Black and Brown communities around flooding and water quality and even economic development? We also advocate for flood protection. And so this is just a conversation about flood protection, and we want to center nature-based solutions and flood protection, and that's also equity. This middle bottom image is an image of a sanitary sewer overflow. And so you'll hear me talking about clean water and how sewage, our kind of fight around sewage is really a critical issue as well. Bottom left image right here is just the image from being on site with the wetland, in which we saw that this developer was planning on building a multi-home development and on top of a wetland. And so you see the actual water kind of creeping in right here. And so we know that if that development happens, that's going to create flooding in that development and for that community. And so this is just a sample of our work. We work across the lower Galveston Bay watershed, which is essentially Greater Houston. So we fight for the 10 counties in Greater Houston. Program areas are protecting wetlands, clean water, and just climate transitions. And what just climate transitions looks like is really sort of like flood mitigation, and really from an intersectional perspective of how we are experiencing increased flooding because of climate change, and how can we fight for community in this transition in a city like Houston. I just wanted to give you a little sample of some of the headlines to kind of see how do we show up in the community? What are people talking about in relation to our work? And these are some recent headlines, I would say, in the past year and a half. Our $2 billion consent decree that we led against the city of Houston that we're currently monitoring. The emerging consent decree or around with Baytown with the 21 million gallons of sewage that's affecting Latinx Hispanic communities. The Ike Dike work around that, and just really thinking about the lens that how do we fight for our habitat and our kind of the environmental impacts of increased water infrastructure kind of development. And then just again, looking at flood control too. So I just wanted to kind of let you know of how we work, because it's such a unique way. It's really in this interdisciplinary way. We have a community science manager, we have a legal director, and we just hired a water justice specialist earlier in this year who's doing more of the community outreach aspect of the work. The Clean Water Act has been our major tool to enforce protection of our waterways. And so we use science-based advocacy and litigation and enforcement as well. And so I'm really happy to kind of like be really bold about how we protect our waters and our community's health through enforcement. And so, you know, just some key points is that we know that the Gulf region has really kind of been treated as a sacrifice zone. And so how do we call that out and just are honest about that? Just the like overall water quality of the Gulf region and the Houston's waterways is incredibly polluted. And so we want to just acknowledge that as part of the work that we do, and we call that out. We also acknowledge major regulatory gaps. And so in order to support the health of our community and our clean water, we're filling major regulatory gaps through our litigation. And just the Clean Water Act, it's the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act this year. And so we just use that as a critical tool to fight for our wetlands, and then also for our waterways through sewage. Just want to remind you before I kind of shift and talk about the pollution and the problems that we have. I think a really critical narrative is that that we are trying to lift up is that we really have to fight for our waterways in our community, because we are a water-rich, people-rich, biodiverse region. I think that we don't talk enough about Houston being ecologically diverse and biodiverse, that we talk about the diversity of people too. And so I think that we want to make sure that we hone in on this critical narrative that we have a history of rich prairies and wetlands and immense biodiversity that supports our recreational interests, but also provides critical flood protection and flood mitigation and water quality kind of services too. I want to be mindful of services, because we also want to be mindful that our relationship with nature is reciprocal and not just sort of extractive of what we can get from nature as well. But we are the Bayou City. And so how do we, the irony to have so much pollution in a water-rich city makes us be even more bolder and to fight for our waterways and for our community. And so we are, you know, what I want to just lift up is that we're advocating for water through this kind of socio-environmental and health equity lens. It's really baked into the work that we do. My goal in the next year plus is to make this more pronounced and support this through data. I think the data piece is the missing piece around the health equity lens. And so, but we feel that that is a natural kind of part of the work. And so these are some images of, this is actually an image of the 1994 San Jacinto flood. I don't know if folks remember that, if you were in Houston. And it was through a major flood that caused a break in an oil pipe. And just the kind of image of a river on fire with the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act reminds us of the whole impetus around the Clean Water Act was through rivers on fire. And so the irony to see that is really a painful one. This is a reminder of just Harvey, and when we had Harvey, the oil spills that were caused because of that. Some of them were intentional, and so oil releases by some of our petrochemical companies happen purposely during a storm, because we know that that can be easily more hidden and done under the radar, and then some happen naturally just because of the kind of breakdown in equipment. And then we also have just the sanitary sewer overflows that happen. And so this is just the sewage release that happens through the aged water infrastructure. And so what we find is that a lot of folks will talk about the pollutants and the contaminants that are in our waterways, but not talk about people. Or we'll only talk about our nature and the beautiful biodiversity, and we won't talk about the inequities that we face. Or we might talk about our people and forget about our rich biodiversity and habitats. So how do we do both? So I'm going to just go quickly through these other slides just to give you some concrete examples of kind of how this shows up in our work. We believe that our solution to flooding and water quality has always been here. And so our fight for wetlands has been a part of our organization for the 21 years of existence. We've always fought for protecting our wetlands. We've just launched a tool of the 5 most critical wetland areas, and our community science manager has been working with our consultant, Dr. John Jacob, to research and to map critical wetland areas that we feel are endangered and will be lost with increased development and without protecting these areas. And our kind of strategy around wetland protection, these are some of the ways that we kind of protect our wetlands through our Wetland Watch. Through these tools that we're launching through this 5 critical wetlands tool, we just launched a wetlands mapper tool. And so one thing that I want to kind of lift up is the data to action piece, that we are creating tools that converge data that normally is not together. And so with our wetlands mapper, we're using data from the National Wetlands Inventory, along with the 5 critical wetlands and additional data to have a better sense of like the wetlands that we need to protect in the area. And so these are some of the tools that those tools that we've just launched, and you can see that on our website. Our Clean Water Act, this is one of the 39 wastewater treatment plants in Houston that was underwater during Harvey. So this is just a really powerful image to be reminded of how this will affect water, how this affected water quality. And so we have these treatment plants, and what we uncovered after years of research is major sewage overflow and sewage releases through the city of Houston. And we issued an intent to sue the city of Houston. And that resulted in a $2 billion consent decree that we are currently monitoring. And next year we'll move towards kind of mobilizing community and educating community around the consent decree. One thing that I want to kind of share is that we also are, we could stop with the consent decree, but we're also sort of lifting up that this is a disproportionately impacting Black and Brown communities. And so we've launched some critical tools to kind of monitor that. And I think you might appreciate this from like a health equity perspective. We've launched a Justice in the Sewers map. And as everyone knows, you can see the Houston arrow that emerges in this. So here's the Houston arrow right here. And what we found, the Justice in the Sewers map is basically combining data from the City of Houston mandated consent decree data that they have to provide to us to show us the progress of infrastructure that they are fixing to repair and to repair around these sewage overflows and to reduce water pollution. And then we also included the census tract data to kind of show a more social vulnerability index. And so you can look at this, and this shows kind of where larger amounts of sewage is impacting communities. As you can imagine, we see that this is impacting communities by zip code, and that more sewage is impacting Blacker and Browner zip codes. And we see that less is affecting folks in this Houston arrow. So this little yellow area, as folks know, is at Houston arrow, and less, it's affecting less folks. We also have our monthly POO report, and you can check that out on our website. Uh-oh. Oh, well, I'll give you a little sample of the POO report. Uh-oh. Let's see. And so the POO report was something that we did before we launched the Justice in the Sewers map to monitor the consent decree on a monthly basis. And this just kind of gives you a little bit more details on that Houston arrow, but I encourage you to check out the Justice in the Sewers map. And I think that the main thing that we are exploring is around the hotspots that emerge. It's not enough to look at the City of Houston consent decree data, but we have to pair that with the census tract data to see emerging hotspots and to tell the story of water injustices that emerge around sewage. But this is an example of our approach for just larger work around water justice. So with that, I wanted to let you know of an upcoming event, and that gives you, I hope that gives you a sense of our work. We have a fundraiser, and as our executive director, I'm always trying to mobilize resources in support of the growth of our work. So I'd love for you to come to our Folks and Oysters event, which has been virtual for quite some time. And it will be at the Sunset Coffee Building on the rooftop overlooking Buffalo Bayou. So please do come. And then I just want to end on recommendations for action. So we welcome, I thought that with this group, we are increasingly collaborating with universities, which has been one of my kind of priorities as the executive director. I've facilitated or initiated the strategic partnership with Rice University, who their spatial studies lab and diluvial initiative, which that's how we were able to do increased data to action tools and our justice in the sewers map, and then also the wetlands, the critical wetlands map. So because we're small, we realize that these university partnerships are important, and just partnerships around research are important. We're also in dialogue with Texas Southern University's Bullard Center as well. But I just wanted to pose to the group that we welcome research collaborations, particularly around health equity. We realize that the work of water is not always accessible to folks. So if I talk about wetlands, or if I talk about water quality or sewage overflows, the big point of entry to this work would be health equity, because people want to understand how this impacts community, what are like kind of qualitatively, quantitatively. So I welcome collaborations around this to better tell our story and to better illustrate the impacts of our work. My email is here, ayana@bayoucitywaterkeeper.org. And I encourage you to visit and follow us. Our website is on the verge of being relaunched, but check it out and go to our blog too, where you can find up-to-date information, and support us, please. So with that, I'll pause and stop sharing and see if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayana. I do see one comment in the question or in the chat from Tanweer. I know you have a hard stop at 9, but ask for specific actions, in particular Baytown.
Yes.
I don't know if there's something specific that Tanweer, I don't know if you're still on.
Yeah, thanks, Tanweer. Tanweer is on our board of directors, and actually Tanweer invited me, or encouraged me to present. But yeah, we are in the process of working with City of Baytown around a possible consent decree. We're not quite there yet. And we know that with that consent to decree, we've assessed sewage overflows in the city, disproportionately affecting Latinx communities, as I mentioned. Right now, I would say that the action is, right now we are just trying to connect with communities in Baytown to see what their needs are, so that we can determine an environmental, so we can fight for a community around an environmental impacts project that centers their needs. So I would say if you have connections in Baytown, to let us know. And then beyond that, we welcome you just to kind of join the list, and we keep folks up to date on additional actions that are needed.
This is wonderful, Ayana. Are you connected with the Be Well Baytown folks?
I don't think so, but I will say that our water justice specialists and our legal director have been doing more of the outreach. But let me make a note of that. Can you tell me what BUL is?
The Be Well Baytown effort is facilitated by MD Anderson, but it's a broad health collaborative down in Baytown. Okay. So I'm sure that your work would be a welcome addition to the conversations that they're having there. I'm happy to do the connection.
That sounds great. I'll follow up with you on that, Heidi.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Ayana. I know you have to jump. And so now we're going to shift gears and invite Dr. Murray to the stage to present on water infrastructure.
Can you see my screen, Alicia? And also, can you hear me okay?
Yes, on both.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I have to say, I don't know if Ayana is still on the line, but I thoroughly enjoyed that presentation. It's what you're trying to do, Alicia, is something that I really appreciate, which is bringing people from different walks of life and having them talk to one another. And that, I think it's so important to know what other experts and other folks are doing. This was a tough presentation for me to put together because I wasn't sure what to come here and talk to you about. So I'll go with what I have put together, and hopefully this will be worth your time, the 15 minutes of your time. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is, I think Alicia talked a little bit about my background, but I wanted to talk about the company that I work for. I manage the Houston and Corpus Christi offices for a company called Jacobs. But Jacobs is a global company, and we essentially serve, we do a lot of infrastructure projects for various cities and places, various clients. Someone had put this to me in a very simple way. We help build cities. I think that's kind of what we do at the bottom of it. One of the things we pride ourselves in is that we have a global footprint, and we take that expertise of being present globally, and we provide solutions locally. So we're very strongly connected to our clients and our communities locally, and we bring the expertise and experience of working on global issues to local areas. Some details about our company, 400 offices, we're in 40 countries, about $14 billion annual revenue. So it's a big company essentially. But specifically as it relates to Texas and Oklahoma, we are a Texas-based company, so we are local to this region. And we have about 1,300 people here in Houston serving the communities of Houston, and then about, I think it's about 4,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 people in Texas and Oklahoma. So we have 7 offices in Texas and 2 offices in Oklahoma. I just thought I'm going to share these slides with you. So I thought it would be good to have that information for you guys. So why am I here, and what am I trying to talk to you guys about? What I wanted to focus on, and Jacobs does a lot of things, but what I wanted to particularly focus on is our portfolio in the world of water. And I also wanted to talk about why that is important and why do I care about it. First thing is, in terms of our company organization, we have 2 different businesses, people and places, and critical missions. Essentially, critical missions is everything that has some level of security clearance that normal people would not have. So when we do work for NASA, when we do work for DoD, those are the kind of projects that go into the critical missions group. But the rest of it is people and places. So within people and places, water is a big focus for us. And we focus on all aspects of water, whether that is conveyance and storage, or managing the resources, or drinking water and recycled water, quality and wastewater. We do everything. And once you look at the operations, we provide services in all aspects of managing water supply, whether that is planning, design build, operations, and program management. So we kind of cover the entire life cycle of water. One of the things I have an expertise in, and I have worked for 20 years in the water world. I have a PhD in water resources, and that is to develop what we call One Water solutions. And essentially what this does is instead of looking at each aspect of managing water resources in a silo, the approach of a One Water solution or an integrated solution looks at addressing water challenges in a comprehensive and holistic way. And why do we do it? Because that's an efficient and the right thing to do. But the second thing is it saves a lot of money. So there are 3 things that I'm extremely passionate about, and that is the importance of water. I do think water is a basic human right, and everyone should have access to water. Human beings do not survive for more than 3 days if we do not have water. But if you look at air, we do not pay any premium for air, but when we look at water resources, we do pay some, some of our tax dollars go towards managing water, and we do pay a water bill. So one of the things I am extremely passionate about is what I can do as a professional that will reduce the amount of money it takes to manage the water, because we never pay for the water itself, we pay for the amount of money it takes to manage and move the water through the system, right? So the more efficient we can get, the cheaper it will be. So that is one of my initiatives. The second thing is, how can we make water more accessible, which gets into the equity part of it. So I'm hoping I can cover the rest of the discussion focusing on those 2 aspects. So a couple of things. There is a regulatory imperative for all of us, whether that is consultants or city officials or consumers, to make sure water quality is maintained and that it results in healthy behavior for humans. So there is a Safe Drinking Water Act that we all have to abide by, and it protects the nation's drinking water. There are about roughly 50,000 community water systems. So whether you take City of Houston or City of Sugar Land, all of these are community water systems that are treating water for over 300 million Americans. The only other source of water, if it is not treated by this community system, is groundwater, which people have wells in their backyard and they treat it themselves, or sometimes it doesn't require treatment. These systems, these community water systems are supposed to provide customers confidence reports that show what their water quality looks like, what are some of the things that they're treating, and make sure that we are taking care of the health of the citizens. And if certain times that quality is not being maintained, we are required, and when I say we, it's a collective we as water professionals are required to provide boil water advisories or notices so that citizens are aware of the quality of water they're consuming. Now, this is an interesting statistic, and I wanted to talk about this. When I go to restaurants in any city, any place, I always ask for tap water. This is just my personal preference because I believe that we as water professionals are treating the tap water to the level of quality that it needs to be. So what happened is American Water Works Association is a professional organization that does work in educating people all across the world about the importance of water. And they had conducted a survey for people all across United States, trying to gather information from them about their confidence on tap water. 80% of those survey respondents said they are confident that tap water meets their water quality requirements, and 20% said that it doesn't. So I thought that was an interesting statistic for you to know. And the last and the most important piece that I wanted to talk about is social equity. Water should be accessible to everyone in the same way. It is such an easy statement, but it is such a difficult one. And the more you know about how water is managed amongst various cities and parts of the world, you will be surprised how inequitable water is right now and how much more there is desire to be done, both in terms of the quality and the accessibility. So with that, I wanted to talk about why water quality matters. Why is it important that the water be of a certain quality for consumption? Can you imagine turning a tap and the water looking like it does in the picture? The first thing is it's unappetizing. I could take a report of that particular source of supply and I could say, hey, this meets all the requirements, everything is good about this water, and you would still not drink it, right? Because it's unappetizing, but more importantly, you can clearly tell that there is something wrong with it and it is not treated. Now, you would be surprised that there are multiple communities in this country. Sometimes when they turn their tap, the water does come across like that. So this is why water quality is important, and we need to focus on making sure that the quality is clean when people turn on their taps. There is no better way for me to explain this situation other than walk you through the Jackson, Mississippi crisis. And I sincerely apologize if you were following this and this is a redundant information, but I did want to walk you through kind of how this whole thing unrolled and what it meant to people. So the problem wasn't a water quality problem. What happened in Jackson, Mississippi was not a water quality problem. Essentially, there were heavy rains in the city, and there was a flooding of one of the rivers. It's called the Pearl River. And essentially what happened is because of the flooding event, it overwhelmed the city's water plant, one of the main water plants. And that water plant was already broken to begin with because it has not been maintained for many years. And because of the flooding event, that exacerbated the water plant operations and the system broke. So therefore, there were shutdowns, the water shutdowns, and the boil order notices were issued because there were pipes that were bursting and the entire system was broken. What happened was and I'll get into the challenges in a minute here. So after that, the governor had floated a proposal to privatize the water system. And there were areas with majority white residents, and their system and their sewer systems were well maintained, but there were areas where the residents were, impoverished, and their systems were not maintained properly. So it was a simple incident, but it got extremely complicated, and there were people that did not have water for 3 to 4 weeks. And these were all the issues that I have identified on the slide had caused that situation. Essentially, there were decades of deferred maintenance. So the system was not maintained for many years, 20 years at a time. The federal government and the regulators were giving warning, and they were telling, hey, your system is broken, the water quality, there are water quality implications if you do not fix your system, and those were not addressed sufficiently. The record keeping was poor. So what happened was the more and more affluent people moved to certain neighborhoods, and the underprivileged people moved to other neighborhoods, and the revenues were not being generated properly, and they were not being collected properly. The records were not being kept properly. So there was no money to maintain the system. And the problem was not addressed for years for the sake of political expedience. So there was a significant political divide between the city level and the state level, and the water got stuck in the midst of all of this. And because everyone was fighting a political battle, no one was sitting there and thinking about how can we plan for the future better? How can we address some of these issues? Social equity was not even something they were considering. That wasn't even a part of the conversation. So all of this just led to the situation they were in at that particular point of time. So what happened because of that situation? I don't know if you saw the news on the TV, but there was severe emotional outcry. People were hurt. There was anger. There was mistrust. They said, I probably would never trust my local water system. I am hurt. I am fearful. I am uncertain, I'm confused, I don't know what's happening, I don't know who to reach out to. These were some of the words that the city citizens have used. So one of the lessons to take from this is building that relationship and transparency with your city's constituents is very important so that they don't end up in this situation. There was frustration because the city's officials were both battling the media crisis and the water crisis at the same time, and there was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of finger pointing. I don't know if you saw this, but everyone was saying it was not their fault and someone else's problem. No one was stepping up and saying, hey, I am taking leadership or ownership of this and I'm going to solve. Everyone was just trying to walk away from the problem. So the pace of play, I wanted to talk about this. What happens is, the solution is simple. If you just sit down and put the solution on a piece of paper, it's very, very simple. But what happens is you need to get to that solution in 2 days, or you need to solve that problem in 3 days, because people, when they turn on their tap, the water is brown, and there is a stress and a pressure for you to solve the problem. So you can never keep up the pace of play. So how do you avoid that? Is you start planning sooner. It's all once. If you're trying to solve a problem when it occurs, it's already too late. And the most important lesson we all learned from that is racial inequity. So it wasn't that the system was broken equally for the entire state. It was only broken for parts of the city, parts of the state, and that is unacceptable, and that is not how water should be available and accessible to people. It was a lonely battle because the city at the end of the day was just left to themselves, and they were said, you know what, go figure it out. This is your problem. We are not going to come to aid. Everyone essentially walked away from it. And that city that already had 80% of its constituents in the impoverished areas had to go figure out this solution for themselves. So I know I took a little bit of time, but I wanted to set the stage for what happens when an issue is mismanaged. But I did want to leave you with a positive note and kind of tell you what we are doing right, what we are getting right, and what the city of Houston is doing. What happens is there are all these little pieces that we are investing in, and they all mean, and they help us solve some of these issues in a big and a beautiful way. So one of the best things the city of Houston is doing is they understood, they've looked at LA, they've looked at Flint, Michigan, they've looked at Jackson, Mississippi. They're looking at all these cities that are going through these issues, and they're saying, you know what, Houston is a diverse city. We have social inequities that is at the foundation of all of our problems, and we cannot avoid it. We need social equity should be front and center of every conversation we have. And the second thing I wanted to pick up on what Alana said. Houston is a bio city. Houston is a water city. Water touches everything we do, whether how it impacts our lifeline to how it attracts tourism to our city. Everything is around water. So city understood that, and they have invested in various studies, whether that is the Resilient Houston study, climate action plan study, the integrated water master plan, the complete communities, Build Houston Forward. All of these studies are focused in understanding how do we solve this problem for Houston in a comprehensive and holistic way. Now, you would think that there are multiple studies and therefore there are too many moving pieces in different directions. But one of the things that city is doing really well is trying to connect all of the dots. All of these studies have a specific motive and intent for what they are trying to do, but they all connect together to help the city be resilient and sustainable and equitable for the next 100 years. I think that is the final goal. The other thing, if you look at the goals that the city has given to themselves, and they did not arrive at these goals in a vacuum. They did not sit there, say, hey, this is what we're doing, so here, everyone listen to it. They actually sat down with the constituents, with the stakeholders. They brought most of the people to the table because they've been through this before. They have faced the negative side of planning in a vacuum and not bringing everyone with them and the challenges that they face with it. They have experienced this, and so they learned from their experiences, and they have developed a plan that we have all been part of, or we could be part of. And most of the goals that they've identified for themselves, and I've just pulled out a few here, and it has to do with how do we prepare for an uncertain future? How do we promote smart growth? How do we advance equity and inclusion? How do we transform the city and build resilience and trust? So everything, every goal you read here is to help us become a sustainable, resilient, and equitable city. And what I wanted to show on the right side of this slide is water, I said, ties into everything. It ties into transportation, it ties into energy transition, it ties into efficiency, it ties into material management. I think ports is a key differentiator for the city. So it ties into everything we do as part of the city, and the city understands it, and they are trying to connect the dots in the right way. So let's talk about another organization that is helping us be sustainable, and that is the Harris County Flood Control District. You know, this is an organization that had been faced with probably one of the biggest challenges, which is every hurricane, and Harvey being the most critical one, impacts our bayous. We are a bayou city, and there is a chart that shows all the bayous that the city of Houston is blessed with, and the flood control is their mandate is to manage these bayous. So a good day for a flood control is when there is no flooding event. You know, no news is a good news for them. But, you know, we cannot get away with that. So what they have done is they have made sure their mission includes protecting and enhancing bayous, natural channel design elements. They have stormwater treatment wetlands. So they do want to integrate natural solutions. They do not want to include artificial solutions for their bayou management. They look at site stabilization and revegetation. They look at erosion control. They look at how these best management practices are being effective and implemented, and how they need to be changed if they have to be. And they do conduct water quality monitoring. Now, I can spend a lot of time talking about each and every one of these mandates, but I just wanted to tell you and just give kudos to this organization that has been spending billions of dollars at this point of time, working on one bayou at a time, one project at a time, trying to make the bayous a safer and environmentally conscious place for us. The other organization that is spending significant amount of time and money and dollars is the US Army Corps of Engineers. So when, whether that is Hurricane Ike or some of the previous hurricanes, but most importantly, Harvey, when Harvey happened, the mandate for the US Army Corps was to give a solution to protect our city from the coast, right? And that solution came in the form of, it's called a Sabine to Galveston project. And there are 3 different parts of this project. One is the Orange County Coastal Resiliency Program. Port Arthur and Vicinity Coastal Resilience Program, Freeport and Vicinity Coastal Resilience Program. Now, the government had already allocated this fund, so the money is there. But developing these projects and implementing these projects is a mammoth effort, and it takes an organization like the US Army Corps, working with multiple local entities, local partners, the GCPD being one, the GLO being the other, the City of Houston being one, the flood control being one. They work with all of these stakeholders in making sure they're protecting our coast. And if you're sitting there and thinking, what does coastal protection have anything to do with our health and water quality? It has everything to do with our water quality and health. You know, if we can make sure these storm surges and these hurricane activities do not impact our bayous and our cities and our roads, our highways, that directly impacts our water quality. It makes our water quality better, and it also makes sure we are staying healthy and protected. So the first project is the Orange County, and I will quickly, very, very quickly, I know we're getting to the end of the time here, but I'll quickly walk through what this project is. Essentially, this is to provide coastal storm surge protection and flood damage risk reduction for the residents and businesses in Orange County. So when this project is completed, it will help Orange County become more resilient from future storms and flood events. So there is a new levee system that will help reduce the storm surge. There is also, there are a few different parts of this project. There is approximately 15 miles of new earthen levees, 10 miles of new concrete flood walls, 50 gravity drainage structures that include multiple pump stations, 30 closure structures that help movement through roads and railroad crossings, 2 navigator sector gates that help, they're essentially the lift gates that help control the storm surge from getting into the city, and restoration of approximately 450 acres of coastal marsh and 560 acres of forested wetlands as mitigation from this project. And just the timeline is the project is already in the design process. The design will complete in 2024. The construction goes from 2024 through 28. And the project ideally should be complete by 2028. I am so proud and happy to be involved in this particular project, my firm, and there are a couple of other firms that are involved in this particular project. The second one is Port of Freeport project. It's kind of a similar solution. And essentially here, the solution is to evaluate and repair and replace the Freeport port where it is required. And the recommendation for this project is essentially to raise about 13 million miles of existing levee system, construct approximately 5.5 miles of flood wall, and install some navigation gates at Dow Barge Canal to reduce storm surge penetration into that area. So real quick, the design had already started for this project. The construction is underway from 2023 to 2026, and the project will be complete in 2026. And the last one is the Port Arthur project. And just a very few quick details on this project. So essentially, the solution here looks like, 27 miles of levee embankment, 6.6 miles of flood wall, 34 drainage or intake structures, 26 closure structures for road and railroad crossings, and constructed wave barrier features. They also include 13 pump stations, and 8 of which are currently under construction. So bottom line from all these projects, when they're all complete around the 2028 timeframe, is that you would have a system along the coast that will protect our coast from the storm surge and some of these hurricane impacts from impacting our city. So I just wanted to make sure you knew what are some of the key things that are going on around you, and how some of these key organizations are helping make sure our water resources, whether that is your tap water or the bayou resources or the coastal resources, that they are being protected, that they are being resilient, and they're being equitable. So I will pause with that and see if you guys have any questions for me.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but fantastic presentation. I really appreciate what you shared, about water tying to everything. It truly is all connected, and that's one thing we learn with the collective. I mean, that's why we have to take a systems approach, to addressing these issues. It's not one person, and what you're talking about, the Jackson, Mississippi challenges, is almost like the leaders that are playing hot potato. It's like passing the buck to someone else, when it's really all of us, responsible for standing up, using our voices, putting the right people in office to lead, and to make those tough decisions. We're putting a lot of trust in their hands. So does anyone have any comments? Anyone want to come off mute and, any comments or questions for Stan?
Yeah, hi, this is Shrila Sharma. I'm one of the co-leads of the Health Equity Collective. Thank you so much for joining us today. I do have a question. One of the roles of the Health Equity Collective is we have a lot of, what someone has called silos of excellence in our region, a lot of great work happening and being done by great organizations. And one of the pieces that we are working on is how do we connect this work, right? So we can facilitate each other's work better. And so my question for SPAN is, that given you're a for-profit entity, and how is Jacobs working on or working with other nonprofit entities, such as we just heard from Bayou City Waterkeeper, for example, in doing some of the advocacy or other type of work related to water quality, and how can the Health Equity Collective, I guess, facilitate that? I think it's critical for all stakeholders, for-profit, nonprofit, government, to be at the table to develop sustainable solutions. So would love to, and maybe, I know we are out of time, but maybe that's something I would definitely like for us to come back to discuss further.
So that's a very good question, Shrila. Being in this industry for 20 years, I can tell you how the water, I say industry, but the water society, right, community has evolved over the 20 years. Earlier, when we used to work on projects or solutions, it was done in a vacuum. Like we would go work with the city, whoever that is, and we would develop a solution, and then there would be a report and a project would get implemented, and no one would ever know it. It was one of those things quietly getting done. I think the biggest change I've seen in that trend is the outreach aspect of every project. So whatever city it is these days, when they work on a project, a key part of their project is outreach, whether that is their internal outreach program or externally outsourced, like Alana's team. So one of the things I would say is look for what the city is saying, look for their outreach arm and hear them. Awareness is the most important thing. So where I participate, other than providing solutions on the project side, I am on various committees within the Houston area, whether that is the NHA or AWWA, and we talk to various stakeholders here about the importance of the projects we're working on, just like I did today. And awareness is important. Second thing is speak out. They come and ask you for your feedback and your input. So, and we're trying to go to the places where we cannot reach, and we're trying to get our outreach mechanism to be, again, accessible to everyone. But speak out, tell them what your problems are, tell them this is a challenge. And I think the more we participate and engage, the more successful we will be. I do have a 9:30 that I have to drop off, but I am going to share this presentation and my contact in the chat, and I'll be very happy to talk if you have any more questions.
Thank you so much, Stan, and thank you all for joining. I dropped a link in the chat for our Mighty Networks platform. That's where you can find all of our resources. You can share resources as well as events. Tomorrow we have a orientation session. So if you're not familiar with the Health Equity Collective and want to learn more how to get involved, you can find the event information on our Mighty Networks platform. So thank you all for joining today, and have a fabulous day.